The silence in the Thompson household was a thick, suffocating blanket, heavier than the late afternoon shadows stretching across the living room carpet. Just hours ago, the air had vibrated with the boisterous energy of 8-year-old Ethan, his laughter echoing against the walls as he built a sprawling fort of blankets and chairs. Now, only the rhythmic tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hallway dared to break the oppressive quiet. Carol Thompson stood frozen by the window, her knuckles white as she clutched the faded floral curtains. Her gaze was fixed on the empty street, as if sheer willpower could conjure her son back into existence. Each passing car, each distant shout from a neighbor sent a jolt of desperate hope through her, quickly followed by the crushing wave of disappointment. "He's not coming back, is he?" Her voice, when it finally emerged, was a fragile whisper, barely audible above the clock's steady pulse. Beside her, David Thompson ran a trembling hand through his thinning hair, his face a mask of haggard disbelief. The usually composed architect looked utterly lost, his sharp features softened by a raw vulnerability Carol had rarely witnessed. "Don't say that, Carol," he choked out, his voice thick with unshed tears. He's probably just playing at a friend's house. He lost track of time." But even as the words left his lips, the tremor in his voice betrayed his own wavering conviction. The last time they had seen Ethan was around 4 p.m. He'd asked to go play in the small park down the street, a place he frequented almost daily. David had watched him skip away, a flash of bright blue jacket disappearing behind the row of manicured hedges that lined their property. That image was now burned into David's memory, replaying on an endless loop. At 6 p.m., when Ethan hadn't returned for dinner, they'd started to worry. A quick search of the park and the immediate neighborhood had yielded nothing. By 7 p.m., worry had escalated into a gnawing fear that coiled in their stomachs like a cold serpent. The call to the police had been made at 7:15 p.m., a moment that forever cleaved their lives into before and after. Detective Sarah Miller arrived at the Thompson residence just before 8 p.m. The flashing lights of the patrol car painted stark shadows across the manicured lawn, an intrusion of chaos into the ordered tranquility of suburban life. Sarah, with her no-nonsense demeanor and sharp, observant eyes, took in the scene. The distraught parents, the quiet, well-kept house that seemed to hold its breath, the gathering twilight that deepened the mystery. As she stepped into the living room, the air crackled with unspoken tension. Carol's eyes, red and swollen, darted between Sarah and the front door, clinging to a fragile thread of hope. David, his shoulders slumped in defeat, paced restlessly, leaving a trail of anxious energy in his wake. "Tell me again from the beginning," Sarah said, her voice calm yet firm, cutting through the haze of panic. "Every detail, no matter how insignificant it may seem." And so the Thompsons began to recount the last known hours of their son, their voices trembling with a mixture of fear, guilt, and a desperate plea for answers. As Sarah listened, a knot of unease tightened in her chest. Something in the perfect picture they painted felt off. A subtle dissonance beneath the surface of their grief, a flicker of something hidden in the shadows. The disappearance of Ethan Thompson was just the beginning. The unraveling had only just begun. Detective Sarah Miller wasn't one for sentimentality. In her line of work, emotions were a liability, a fog that obscured the sharp edges of truth. She'd learned early on to build walls, to compartmentalize, to treat each case as a puzzle to be solved, not a tragedy to be mourned. But even Sarah, with her hardened exterior, felt a prickle of unease in the Thompsons' living room. The air was thick with a grief so palpable it was almost a physical presence. Yet beneath it, she sensed a subtle tremor of something else, something discordant. Sarah was 38, with a lean, athletic build honed by years on the force. Her dark hair, usually pulled back in a severe bun, framed a face that was both striking and weary. Deep lines, etched around her eyes, spoke of countless sleepless nights and the weight of the darkness she'd witnessed. There was a quiet intensity in her gaze, a hunter's focus that rarely wavered. Her colleagues at the precinct called her the Ice Queen, a nickname she'd earned through her unflinching demeanor and her uncanny ability to detach herself from the emotional maelstrom of crime scenes. But beneath the icy facade, a vulnerability simmered, fueled by a past she kept tightly locked away. 5 years ago, Sarah had lost her younger sister, Emily, in a hit-and-run accident. The case had gone cold, the driver never identified, leaving Sarah with a gaping wound of unresolved grief and a burning need for justice. The experience had irrevocably shaped her, hardening her resolve while simultaneously making her acutely sensitive to the pain of others. As she questioned the Thompsons, Sarah's professional mask was firmly in place. She asked precise, probing questions, her voice devoid of inflection. She observed their body language, their fleeting glances, the subtle hesitations in their answers. She noted the way David's hand trembled when he spoke of Ethan's laughter, the way Carol's eyes darted nervously around the room, avoiding her husband's gaze. Sarah's methods were meticulous and relentless. She believed in the power of details, in the tiny, seemingly insignificant clues that often held the key to unlocking the truth. She trusted her gut instinct, that whisper of intuition that had guided her through countless investigations. Back at the precinct, Sarah reviewed the initial reports, her brow furrowed in concentration. The evidence was scant. No witnesses, no signs of foul play, no indication of where Ethan might have gone. It was as if the boy had simply vanished into thin air. Her phone buzzed, a text message from her estranged husband, Mark. "Can we talk?" it read. Sarah stared at the screen for a long moment, a flicker of pain crossing her face before she deleted the message without replying. Her personal life was a minefield she preferred to avoid, a distraction from the all-consuming pursuit of justice. As the night deepened, Sarah found herself drawn back to the Thompson case. The image of Ethan's bright blue jacket, as described by David, haunted her. It was a detail, a small, vivid splash of color against the muted backdrop of the investigation. And Sarah Miller had learned long ago that even the smallest details could hold the biggest secrets. From the outside, the Thompsons were the epitome of suburban success. Their 2-story colonial house, nestled on a quiet cul-de-sac in the affluent neighborhood of Oak Creek Estates, was a testament to their prosperity. Manicured lawns, a pristine white picket fence, and a basketball hoop in the driveway completed the idyllic scene. It was the kind of image that graced the covers of lifestyle magazines, the embodiment of the American dream. David Thompson, with his sharp intellect and ambitious drive, was a partner at a prestigious architectural firm. His designs were known for their sleek modernity and innovative use of space, earning him accolades and a comfortable income. He was a pillar of the community, active in the local Rotary Club and a regular attendee at the Oak Creek Community Church. Carol Thompson, with her warm smile and effortless elegance, was the perfect complement to her husband. A former teacher, she now devoted her time to raising Ethan and volunteering at the local library. She was the heart of the home, the glue that held the family together. Her days were filled with school pickups, bake sales, and playdates, a carefully orchestrated ballet of domesticity. Ethan, with his boundless energy and infectious curiosity, was the apple of their eye. He excelled in school, was a star on his Little League team, and possessed a mischievous grin that could melt even the sternest of hearts. He was, by all accounts, a happy and well-adjusted child, the embodiment of his parents' love and devotion. Their life was a carefully constructed tapestry of dinner parties, weekend soccer games, and family vacations. They were the couple that other couples envied, the family that neighbors admired. They hosted elegant gatherings in their spacious dining room, their laughter echoing through the house, a soundtrack to their seemingly perfect existence. Their social media profiles painted an equally flawless picture: beaming smiles, perfectly posed family photos, and heartfelt captions about love and gratitude. They projected an image of unity and contentment, a facade that masked any hint of the complexities and struggles that lay beneath the surface. But even in this picture of perfection, subtle cracks began to appear upon closer inspection. The forced brightness of Carol's smile in some photos, the way David's eyes sometimes held a distant, troubled look, the fleeting moments of tension that occasionally punctuated their carefully choreographed interactions. The Thompsons, like any family, had their secrets, their unspoken anxieties, their hidden vulnerabilities. And, as the investigation into Ethan's disappearance deepened, these cracks would widen, threatening to shatter the carefully constructed facade of their perfect life. The longer Sarah spent around the Thompsons, the more the carefully constructed image of their perfect family began to unravel. It wasn't anything overt, not at first. It was the subtle undercurrents, the unspoken tensions that hung in the air like a gathering storm. During her initial interviews, Sarah had noticed the way David and Carol seemed to avoid each other's gaze. Their interactions were polite, even affectionate at times, but there was a forced quality to it, a lack of genuine warmth. It was as if they were performing for an audience, and Sarah was their unwilling spectator. One evening, as Sarah reviewed her notes, a detail from her interview with Carol nagged at her. Carol had mentioned a recent argument with David about finances. "It was nothing, really," she'd said, her voice dismissive. "Just a typical marital spat." But Sarah had detected a flicker of something deeper in her eyes, resentment perhaps, or even fear. Deciding to delve deeper, Sarah requested the Thompsons' financial records. The picture they painted was far from the image of affluence they projected. Mounting debts, missed payments, and a looming foreclosure notice hinted at a desperate struggle to maintain their lavish lifestyle. The strain was clearly taking its toll. David's once sharp demeanor had become increasingly erratic. He was prone to sudden outbursts of anger, followed by periods of withdrawn silence. Carol, usually so composed, seemed perpetually on edge, her smile brittle and fragile. Ethan's disappearance had only exacerbated the existing tensions. The shared grief, instead of drawing them closer, seemed to push them further apart. They moved through the house like ghosts, their footsteps echoing in the silence, their words clipped and strained. One afternoon, Sarah returned to the Thompson residence to conduct a follow-up interview. She found David in his study, the room cluttered with architectural blueprints and half-empty bottles of liquor. He was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, and the air around him reeked of desperation. "He's gone, isn't he?" David slurred, his voice thick with alcohol. "He's never coming back." Carol appeared in the doorway, her face pale with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "David, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "You're not helping." "Helping? What's the point of helping?" David retorted, his voice rising. "Our son is gone, Carol. Gone because of this goddamn house, this goddamn life we tried so hard to build." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusations. Sarah watched the exchange, her mind racing. What was David implying? What secrets were buried beneath the surface of their perfect life? As Sarah delved deeper into the Thompsons' world, she realized that the picture of the perfect family was nothing more than an illusion, a carefully crafted facade that was now crumbling under the weight of grief, debt, and hidden resentments. And she suspected that the key to Ethan's disappearance lay hidden within the wreckage of their shattered lives. The investigation into Ethan's disappearance expanded beyond the Thompson household, casting a wider net into the quiet, seemingly uneventful neighborhood of Oak Creek Estates. Sarah knew that in cases like these, witnesses could hold the key, even if they didn't realize it themselves. She began the tedious process of interviewing the Thompsons' neighbors, meticulously documenting their accounts, searching for any detail that might shed light on Ethan's last known movements. Most of the neighbors offered similar accounts. The Thompsons were a private but friendly family. Ethan, a well-behaved boy who often played in the park. No one had seen anything unusual on the day of his disappearance, No strange cars, no suspicious individuals. The uniformity of their stories was both reassuring and frustratingly unhelpful. Then there was Mr. Henry. He lived in the house directly across from the Thompsons, a small, slightly dilapidated bungalow that stood in stark contrast to the manicured lawns and stately homes that surrounded it. Mr. Henry was an elderly man, his age difficult to pinpoint, his face a road map of wrinkles and shadows. He kept to himself, rarely venturing out, and the other neighbors spoke of him in hushed tones, describing him as eccentric or a bit off. Sarah's first encounter with Mr. Henry was unsettling. He answered the door after a long delay, his eyes darting nervously as he peered out from behind a crack. The air inside his house was thick with a musty odor, a strange mixture of dust, old books, and something metallic, something vaguely unpleasant. His living room was dimly lit, cluttered with stacks of newspapers and overflowing ashtrays. Mr. Henry seemed disoriented, his thoughts jumping from one subject to another, his sentences trailing off into silence. "Ethan, you say?" he croaked, his voice raspy and uneven. "Yes, a fine young lad, always polite, always smiling." But his eyes didn't hold the warmth of recollection. They seemed distant, unfocused. Sarah asked him if he had seen Ethan on the day he disappeared. Mr. Henry's demeanor shifted. He became agitated, his hands trembling as he fidgeted with a worn silver locket around his neck. "The park, yes, I saw him," he muttered, his gaze fixed on the floor. "He was there, playing. By the swings, I think." "Can you remember what time you saw him, Mr. Henry?" Sarah pressed gently. He hesitated, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Time? Oh, time slips away, you know. It's like sand through your fingers. One minute it's here, the next, gone." His answer was evasive, unhelpful, but it was more than that. Sarah sensed a deep unease emanating from him, a palpable sense of fear. As she continued her questioning, Mr. Henry's story became increasingly disjointed. He contradicted himself, his memories blurring together, his words laced with a strange, almost poetic vagueness. "The shadows were long that day," he whispered, his eyes widening. They stretched like fingers reaching, grasping. He trailed off, his gaze locking onto a dark corner of the room as if he saw something there that Sarah couldn't. He claimed to have seen Ethan talking to a stranger, a tall man with a dark hat. But then he couldn't describe the man's face, his clothes, or anything specific about him. It was as if he was describing a ghost, a phantom memory that flickered at the edge of his perception. Sarah left Mr. Henry's house with a sense of unease. His testimony was unreliable, almost useless, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. His agitation, his fear, his evasive answers, they were all red flags. Was he simply a confused old man, his mind clouded by age and isolation? Or was there something more sinister, lurking beneath his erratic behavior? Sarah knew she had to dig deeper. She had to unravel the tangled web of Mr. Henry's memories and separate the truth from the shadows that clung to his words. Because in the strange, unsettling tale of the neighbor, she sensed a vital clue, a thread that might lead her closer to finding Ethan. Detective Sarah Miller was a firm believer in leaving no stone unturned. Even the most insignificant detail could be the key that unlocked a case, and she pursued every lead with relentless determination. In the days following Ethan's disappearance, she found herself immersed in a frustrating maze of dead ends and conflicting information. The initial investigation focused on the possibility of abduction. Sarah's team canvassed the neighborhood, distributing flyers with Ethan's picture, interviewing potential witnesses, and scouring security camera footage from nearby businesses. They explored the possibility that Ethan had wandered off, gotten lost in the park, or been taken by a stranger. But the evidence was scant, offering no clear direction. The park itself became a focal point. It was a small, well-maintained green space, usually bustling with families and children. Sarah's team conducted a thorough search, combing through the playground equipment, the surrounding woods, and even the nearby creek. They found nothing. No trace of Ethan, no discarded belongings, no sign of a struggle. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. Sarah reviewed the security camera footage again and again, her eyes scanning the grainy images for any anomaly. A strange car, a suspicious figure, anything out of the ordinary. But the footage showed only the mundane rhythm of everyday life. Dog walkers, joggers, parents pushing strollers. Nothing that stood out. The interview with Mr. Henry continued to haunt Sarah. His erratic behavior and vague recollections were unsettling, but his mention of a tall man with a dark hat lingered in her mind. She tried to verify his story, to find any other witness who might have seen someone matching that description, but no one had. Sarah delved into Mr. Henry's background, hoping to find some explanation for his strange demeanor. She learned that he was a widower, living alone, with no close family. He had a history of mental health issues, including periods of depression and anxiety. Some neighbors whispered about his episodes, times when he would become agitated and disoriented. Was he a reliable witness, or was his testimony simply the product of a troubled mind? Sarah couldn't dismiss him entirely, but she knew she had to approach his account with caution. Meanwhile, the financial investigation into the Thompsons deepened. Sarah's team uncovered a web of debt and deception. David's architectural firm was struggling, and the family was heavily mortgaged. They were living beyond their means, desperately trying to maintain an image of success that was no longer sustainable. The pressure was clearly taking its toll on their marriage. Sarah sensed the growing resentment between David and Carol, the unspoken accusations, the simmering anger. Could their financial troubles be connected to Ethan's disappearance? Was it possible that one of them was involved? Sarah explored this avenue, carefully questioning David and Carol about their finances, their arguments, their relationship. They denied any involvement, their voices laced with a mixture of grief and defensiveness. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something, that there were secrets buried beneath the surface of their carefully constructed facade. As the days turned into nights, the investigation grew increasingly complex. Sarah found herself chasing shadows, following leads that led nowhere, and confronting a wall of silence and uncertainty. The pressure mounted, the weight of the unsolved case heavy on her shoulders. Sleep became a luxury, her dreams haunted by Ethan's face, by the image of his bright blue jacket disappearing behind the hedges. She was driven by a relentless need for answers, a burning desire to bring closure to the Thompsons and to find justice for Ethan. But the truth remained elusive, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. As Sarah Miller dug deeper into the Thompsons' lives, the picture of their perfect family fractured into a mosaic of lies, betrayals, and simmering resentments. The investigation became less about finding Ethan and more about understanding the toxic dynamics that had festered beneath the surface of their seemingly idyllic existence. The financial records told a stark tale of desperation. David's architectural firm was teetering on the brink of collapse, burdened by bad investments and a dwindling clientele. The Thompsons' extravagant lifestyle, the sprawling house in Oak Creek Estates, the expensive cars, all of it was built on a foundation of debt. They were drowning in red ink, clinging to the illusion of wealth while facing imminent financial ruin. This financial pressure had created a rift between David and Carol. Accusations flew, fueled by fear and desperation. Carol blamed David for their precarious situation, his reckless ambition, and poor business decisions. David, in turn, resented Carol's constant nagging, her inability to accept their changing circumstances. But the financial woes were just the tip of the iceberg. Sarah's investigation uncovered evidence of infidelity. David had been having an affair with a younger colleague, a fact Carol had discovered months ago. The betrayal had shattered her trust, leaving her feeling isolated and trapped in a loveless marriage. The tension in the Thompson household was palpable, a suffocating atmosphere of unspoken anger and resentment. Sarah witnessed it firsthand during her interviews, the clipped exchanges, the averted gazes, the barely concealed hostility. It was a powder keg waiting to explode. And then there was the violence. A neighbor, hesitant and fearful, confided in Sarah about witnessing a heated argument between David and Carol. Voices raised, objects thrown, a chilling glimpse behind the closed doors of the Thompson residence. Sarah discovered a police report from a year prior, a domestic disturbance call to the house, quickly dismissed as a misunderstanding. But Sarah suspected it was more than that. She saw the bruises on Carol's arms, carefully concealed beneath long sleeves. She heard the fear in Ethan's voice when he spoke of his parents' arguments. The perfect family was a facade, masking a reality of emotional and potentially physical abuse. One evening, Sarah confronted David about the affair and the allegations of violence. He denied everything, his voice rising in anger, his eyes flashing with a dangerous intensity. "These are lies," he shouted, his face contorted. "My wife and I have our disagreements like any couple, but I would never lay a hand on her. And the affair? That's ancient history." Carol, standing nearby, remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. Her silence spoke volumes. Sarah pressed him, her voice calm but firm. "The evidence suggests otherwise, Mr. Thompson. The financial records, the neighbor's testimony, the police report, it all paints a disturbing picture." David's composure crumbled. He slumped into a chair, his face buried in his hands. "It's a mess," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "We're a mess." The secrets were out, the carefully constructed facade shattered. The Thompsons were not the perfect family they pretended to be. They were a family torn apart by debt, infidelity, and violence. And in the midst of this turmoil, their son had vanished. Sarah couldn't help but wonder, how much did this toxic environment contribute to Ethan's disappearance? Was it a catalyst, a factor that led to his running away, or something far more sinister? The darkness she was uncovering within the Thompson family was deepening, and Sarah knew she was getting closer to the truth, a truth that might be more horrifying than she could have imagined. Just as Sarah felt she was closing in on the Thompsons, a new piece of evidence emerged, throwing the investigation into a completely different direction. It was a classic red herring, a tantalizing clue that seemed to offer a clear answer, but ultimately led them down a false path. A week after Ethan's disappearance, a young woman named Brenda showed up at the police station, claiming to have information about the case. She was visibly distressed, her hands trembling as she spoke to Sarah. Brenda worked at a local coffee shop near the park where Ethan had last been seen. She told Sarah that she had seen Ethan talking to a man on the day he disappeared. This man was not his father. "He was different," Brenda said, her voice hushed. "He had this intense look in his eyes, like he was watching Ethan." Sarah pressed her for details. Brenda described the man as being in his late 20s or early 30s, with a lean build and a distinctive tattoo on his neck, a stylized raven. She remembered him wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, trying to remain inconspicuous. This description sent a jolt of adrenaline through Sarah. It didn't match anyone in Ethan's family or their circle of acquaintances. It was the first solid lead they had in days. Sarah's team immediately launched an investigation into this mysterious man. They reviewed security footage from nearby businesses, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. They interviewed other coffee shop patrons trying to find someone else who might have seen him. Days turned into a week, and the investigation centered entirely on finding the Raven Man, as they began to call him. Sarah felt a surge of hope, a sense that they were finally making progress. The Thompsons, initially the focus of suspicion, were almost entirely cleared. Their alibis checked out, and the evidence pointed away from them. The financial troubles and marital issues, while significant, seemed unrelated to Ethan's disappearance. The media picked up the story of the Raven Man, fueling public interest and anxiety. The pressure on the police to find him intensified. Sarah felt the weight of expectation on her shoulders. But as they delved deeper, inconsistencies began to surface. Brenda's memory seemed hazy at times, her descriptions shifting slightly with each retelling. No other witnesses could corroborate her story. The security footage, despite hours of review, showed no sign of the Raven Man. Sarah started to question Brenda's reliability. Was she genuinely trying to help, or was there another motive behind her story? Was she seeking attention, or was she deliberately trying to mislead them? Then a breakthrough: the tattoo. Sarah's team, after extensive searching, found a match in their database. A local man named Kevin, with a history of petty crimes and a known drug problem, had a raven tattoo on his neck. They tracked him down to a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of town. The tension was thick as they approached his door, guns drawn, ready to confront a potential kidnapper. But what they found inside was a far cry from a criminal mastermind. Kevin was strung out, incoherent, barely able to string a sentence together. He had no recollection of seeing Ethan, no evidence of involvement in his disappearance. The Raven tattoo, the key piece of evidence that had led them to him, turned out to be a cruel dead end. The lead evaporated. Sarah felt a wave of frustration and disappointment. They had chased a ghost, a phantom clue that had led them away from the real answers. The clock was ticking, Ethan was still missing, and they were back at square one. The red herring had served its purpose, distracting them, creating a false sense of progress. Now Sarah knew she had to refocus, to return to the original threads of the investigation and to look even harder at the secrets hidden within the Thompson family. The red herring of the Raven Man had been a frustrating detour, but it had also served to sharpen Sarah's focus. She returned to the Thompson case with renewed determination, her instincts telling her that the key to Ethan's disappearance lay hidden within the family's tangled web of secrets. Rereading her notes, Sarah was struck by a recurring detail: Ethan's prized possession, a worn and faded blue baseball cap. He wore it everywhere, his parents said. It was his comfort, his security blanket. Yet, despite extensive searches of the park and the Thompsons' home, the cap was nowhere to be found. It was a small detail, but it nagged at Sarah. If Ethan had simply wandered off, wouldn't he have taken his beloved cap with him? Its absence felt significant, a silent clue that whispered of something more sinister. Sarah decided to revisit the Thompson residence, this time with a specific purpose. She asked Carol for permission to conduct another search, focusing on Ethan's room and his belongings. Carol, initially hesitant, eventually relented, her eyes filled with a mixture of grief and exhaustion. Ethan's room was a typical boy's haven. Posters of superheroes adorned the walls, scattered toys lay on the floor, and a half-finished model airplane sat on his desk. It was a room frozen in time, a poignant reminder of the life that was now missing. Sarah meticulously searched every corner, her fingers tracing along shelves, peering under the bed, examining drawers. She found nothing unusual, no sign of the cap, no indication of foul play. Just as she was about to give up, her gaze fell upon a small, locked wooden box tucked away in the back of Ethan's closet. It was an old jewelry box, its surface scratched and faded. "What's this?" Sarah asked, her voice calm but her heart pounding with anticipation. Carol hesitated, her face paling slightly. It's just an old box. Ethan found it in the attic a while ago. He keeps his treasures in it." "May I see what's inside?" Sarah asked gently. Carol's reluctance was palpable. She fidgeted with her hands, her eyes darting nervously around the room. I don't have the key," she stammered. "It's probably lost." Sarah's instincts screamed. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that the box held a vital clue. She had to see what was inside. "Perhaps we can find a way to open it," she suggested, her voice firm but reassuring. After a tense moment, Carol agreed. They tried various methods, but the lock remained stubbornly closed. Finally, Sarah called for a locksmith. The locksmith arrived, his tools clinking softly as he worked on the delicate lock. The silence in the room was thick with anticipation, broken only by the rhythmic clicking of the tumblers. And then, with a final click, the box sprang open. Inside, nestled among a jumble of small toys and trinkets, lay Ethan's blue baseball cap. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The cap was there, in Ethan's possession, hidden away in a locked box. It made no sense. If he had simply wandered off, why would he have left his beloved cap behind, locked away in a secret place? A wave of suspicion washed over Sarah, stronger than ever before. The presence of the cap in the box pointed to a deliberate act, a carefully orchestrated deception. She looked at Carol, her eyes searching for answers. Carol's face was a mask of shock and confusion, but Sarah detected a flicker of something else beneath the surface. Fear. Guilt. "Carol," Sarah said, her voice low and intense, "we need to talk." The discovery of the cap was Sarah's breakthrough, the crucial piece of the puzzle that shattered the Thompsons' carefully constructed alibi. It was the key that unlocked a new level of suspicion and propelled the investigation into a darker, more dangerous direction. The discovery of Ethan's baseball cap in the locked box transformed the investigation into a high-stakes confrontation. The carefully constructed facade of the grieving parents crumbled, revealing the raw emotions and dark secrets that lay beneath. Sarah decided to interview Carol first, sensing that she was the more vulnerable of the two, the one most likely to crack under pressure. She led Carol to the living room, the same room where the investigation had begun, now filled with a palpable sense of dread. "Carol," Sarah began, her voice gentle but firm, "can you explain why Ethan's cap was hidden in a locked box in his closet?" Carol's eyes darted around the room, avoiding Sarah's gaze. She fidgeted with her hands, her voice trembling as she struggled to find an explanation. I don't know," she stammered. "Maybe he put it there himself. Maybe it was a game, a secret hiding place." Sarah pressed her gaze unwavering. A game? A hiding place that required a locked box and a lost key? That doesn't make sense, Carol. Children don't hide their favorite things away like that. Carol's composure began to fray. Tears welled up in her eyes and her voice broke as she spoke. "He was a complicated boy, Ethan. He had secrets, things he kept from us. Maybe he was afraid someone would take it." "Afraid of who, Carol?" Sarah asked softly. "Who would take his cap?" Carol hesitated, her lips trembling. "I don't know," she whispered. Maybe David." The accusation hung in the air, heavy with implication. Sarah's eyes widened. "David? Why would David take Ethan's cap?" Carol's voice dropped to a near whisper. They fought sometimes. David could be angry. He would yell, say things. Ethan would get scared. A chilling realization dawned on Sarah. The domestic violence, the anger issues she had sensed in David, could they be connected to Ethan's disappearance? Was it possible that David, in a moment of rage, had harmed his own son? "Tell me about the fights, Carol," Sarah urged, her voice low and intense. "Tell me everything." Carol's floodgates opened. She poured out a torrent of pain and fear, revealing the dark underbelly of her marriage. The verbal abuse, the threats, the occasional physical violence. It was a litany of horrors that had been hidden behind the facade of the perfect family. She described David's volatile temper, his possessiveness, his controlling behavior. She spoke of Ethan's fear, his withdrawal, his desperate attempts to please his father. "He loved David so much," Carol sobbed. "But David, He was so hard on him. He expected so much. Nothing Ethan did was ever good enough. The image of Ethan's bright blue jacket flashed through Sarah's mind, a symbol of innocence lost in a storm of domestic turmoil. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, painting a disturbing picture of a family consumed by darkness. Sarah then turned her attention to David. The confrontation with him was explosive. He denied everything, his anger escalating into a terrifying display of rage. "These are lies," he roared, his face contorted. "Carol is trying to frame me. She's always been jealous, always trying to turn Ethan against me." Sarah stood her ground, her voice firm and unwavering. "The cap, David. Explain the cap. Why was it hidden in a locked box?" David's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. He stammered, his words incoherent. I don't know anything about the cap. Carol is lying. She put it there herself." "Don't lie to me, David," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "We both know that's not true. The cap was Ethan's. He would never have hidden it away like that." The tension in the room was unbearable. It felt as if the walls were closing in, the air thick with unspoken accusations and buried secrets. Then David made a mistake. In his agitated state, he let slip a detail, a small, seemingly insignificant comment that revealed his knowledge of the box's contents. "Ethan kept his special things in there," he said, his voice trailing off. Sarah seized on it. "His special things? How did you know what was inside the box, David? Carol said you didn't have the key." David froze, his face paling. He realized his error, the trap he had unwittingly walked into. The truth was closing in on him, and there was nowhere left to run. The confrontation had shattered the last vestiges of the Thompsons' carefully constructed lies. The secrets were out, the darkness exposed. And Sarah knew, with a chilling certainty, that the truth about Ethan's disappearance was far more horrifying than she could have imagined. The weight of David's confession pressed down on Sarah, a suffocating burden of guilt and horror. The truth about Ethan's disappearance was far more twisted and tragic than she could have ever imagined. David hadn't intentionally harmed Ethan. There was no calculated murder, no premeditated act of violence. It was something far more insidious, born from years of emotional abuse and a desperate attempt to control his son. David, driven by his own insecurities and a need for perfection, had subjected Ethan to relentless pressure. He pushed him to excel in everything from school to sports, his love conditional, based on Ethan's achievements. Ethan, desperate to please his father, tried his best, but it was never enough. David's criticism chipped away at his self-esteem, leaving him feeling inadequate and worthless. The locked box, the hiding place for Ethan's cherished cap, was a symptom of this toxic dynamic. Ethan had hidden the cap away, not from a fear of it being taken, but from a fear of it being ruined. David, in his obsessive need for order, had a habit of organizing Ethan's belongings, sometimes discarding or altering things he deemed messy or unacceptable. Ethan, terrified of his father's disapproval, had hidden the cap to protect it. The day Ethan disappeared, the tension had reached a boiling point. David, fueled by stress and alcohol, had berated Ethan for a minor mistake during a soccer practice. His words were harsh, cutting, designed to wound. Ethan, finally pushed to his breaking point, had run away. Not far, just to the park, seeking solace in the familiar surroundings. But this time, he didn't come back. David, consumed by guilt and fear, had panicked. He knew that if the truth came out, he would lose everything: his family, his reputation, his freedom. So he and Carol made a pact. They would hide the truth, pretend Ethan had simply vanished, and hope that he would eventually return. The lie grew, festered, and consumed them. It drove them further apart, fueling their resentment and guilt. The perfect family facade became a prison, trapping them in a web of their own making. Ethan hadn't been kidnapped. hadn't been harmed by a stranger. He was a casualty of his own family, a victim of the insidious violence that can fester behind closed doors, hidden beneath the veneer of normalcy. The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. The case was solved, but there was no sense of triumph, only a profound sadness and a deep anger at the damage inflicted on a young life. The unexpected culprit wasn't a monster lurking in the shadows, but a father, consumed by his own demons, a family destroyed by its own secrets. It was a stark reminder that the most dangerous threats often come from within. The revelation of David's emotional abuse and the circumstances surrounding Ethan's disappearance prompted swift and decisive action. Sarah Miller, her face grim, moved with the efficiency and authority she was known for. David Thompson was arrested. The charges were not for murder, as there was no evidence to suggest he had directly caused Ethan's death. Instead, he was charged with child endangerment and neglect, the evidence of his prolonged emotional abuse deemed sufficient to warrant prosecution. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. The image of the perfect family shattered so publicly left a stain on Oak Creek estates. Neighbors whispered, their gazes shifting between pity and judgment. The Thompsons, once the envy of the neighborhood, became pariahs. Carol, caught in the crossfire, faced her own set of consequences. While not criminally charged, she was held accountable for her complicity in hiding the truth. Social services launched an investigation into her ability to care for any other children, her role in enabling David's behavior scrutinized. The media descended upon the Thompson residence, their cameras flashing, their microphones thrusting forward, hungry for details of the scandal. The once pristine lawn became a battleground, the white picket fence a symbol of broken promises. The trial was a spectacle. The courtroom was packed, the atmosphere thick with tension. The prosecution painted a damning portrait of David Thompson, a man driven by ambition and control, whose emotional violence had driven his son away. The defense argued that David was a flawed but loving father, that his actions stemmed from a desire to push Ethan to succeed. They attempted to portray Carol as a manipulative wife, exaggerating David's faults to gain leverage in a divorce. But the evidence was overwhelming. The testimony of neighbors, the financial records, the police reports, all painted a consistent picture of a family in crisis, a child caught in the crossfire of his parents' destructive relationship. The jury deliberated for days, their faces etched with the weight of their decision. Finally, the verdict came: guilty on all counts. David Thompson was sentenced to several years in prison, a punishment that seemed both fitting and inadequate. It couldn't bring Ethan back, couldn't undo the damage that had been done. Carol, ostracized by the community and facing the loss of her husband and possibly her remaining family, retreated into herself. The once vibrant woman became a shadow, haunted by guilt and regret. And Ethan? His fate remained unknown. Despite extensive searches, his body was never found. The possibility that he was still alive dwindled with each passing day, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty that offered no closure. Justice had been served in a way, the truth had been revealed, the guilty held accountable. But the victory felt hollow, tainted by the lingering tragedy of a lost child and a family destroyed from within. Just when Sarah Miller thought the case was closed, a chilling revelation turned the spotlight back on the enigmatic neighbor, Mr. Henry. His erratic behavior, initially dismissed as the ramblings of a confused old man, took on a sinister new meaning. While reviewing the case files, Sarah stumbled upon a detail she had overlooked: a faded photograph tucked away in Ethan's room. It was a picture of Ethan playing in his backyard, and in the background, partially obscured by a tree, was Mr. Henry, watching him from his porch. It wasn't just the fact that Mr. Henry was watching Ethan. It was the intensity of his gaze, the unsettling stillness of his posture. It was the look of a predator observing its prey. A wave of unease washed over Sarah. She remembered Mr. Henry's disjointed account, his evasive answers, his strange fixation on Ethan. Could he have been more involved in Ethan's disappearance than she initially thought? Driven by a growing sense of dread, Sarah decided to revisit Mr. Henry. This time she approached his house with caution, her hand resting on her service weapon. The house was even more dilapidated than she remembered, the air thick with the same musty odor. Mr. Henry answered the door, his eyes widening in alarm as he recognized Sarah. "Detective Miller," he croaked, his voice trembling. What do you want?" "I have some more questions, Mr. Henry," Sarah said, her voice firm, "about Ethan." Mr. Henry's agitation was palpable. He fidgeted with his silver locket, his gaze darting nervously around the room. "I told you everything I know," he stammered. "I don't remember anything else." But Sarah wasn't buying it. She had a feeling that Mr. Henry was hiding something, a dark secret buried deep within his troubled mind. She pressed him, her questions becoming more direct, more accusatory. "The photograph, Mr. Henry. Why were you watching Ethan? What were you doing in his backyard?" Mr. Henry's composure crumbled. He backed away from Sarah, his eyes wide with fear. I wasn't doing anything," he whispered. "I was just admiring him. He was a beautiful boy." The words sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. There was something unsettlingly possessive in Mr. Henry's tone, a hint of something twisted and unnatural. Sarah decided to search his house. She didn't have a warrant, but her instincts told her she couldn't wait. She had to know the truth. The search was horrifying. In the basement, hidden behind a false wall, Sarah found a secret room. It was a shrine to Ethan, filled with his belongings. Toys, clothes, photographs, and in the center of the room, a crudely drawn portrait of Ethan, his eyes wide with terror. The evidence was damning. Mr. Henry's obsession with Ethan had crossed a line, transforming into something dark and dangerous. He had been stalking the boy, watching him, collecting his things. But what had he done with Ethan? Was he responsible for his disappearance? Sarah confronted Mr. Henry with the evidence. He broke down, confessing to his obsession, his twisted desire to possess Ethan. But he vehemently denied harming him. "I would never hurt him," he sobbed. "I just wanted to be close to him. He was like a light in my darkness." The truth was a chilling mix of obsession and delusion. Mr. Henry hadn't kidnapped Ethan, but his actions had created an environment of fear and unease. Ethan, sensing Mr. Henry's disturbing fixation, had been terrified of him. The revelation of Mr. Henry's secret added another layer of tragedy to the case. It was a reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, hidden behind the facade of a quiet neighbor. And it raised a haunting question. Could Mr. Henry's obsession, though not directly responsible for Ethan's disappearance, have played a role in his decision to run away? The Ethan Thompson case left an indelible mark on Detective Sarah Miller. It was a case that burrowed deep beneath the surface of suburban life, exposing the darkness that can fester within families and the insidious nature of evil. In the weeks and months that followed, Sarah found herself haunted by the image of Ethan, his bright blue jacket a ghost in her memory. She replayed the events of the investigation in her mind, searching for any detail she might have missed, any clue that could have led her to Ethan sooner. Sleep offered little respite. Nightmares plagued her, filled with distorted images of Mr. Henry's obsession, David's rage, and Carol's silent suffering. She woke up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding, the weight of the unsolved mystery heavy on her chest. The case also affected Sarah's relationships. The emotional toll of the investigation strained her already fragile connection with her estranged husband, Mark. The chasm between them widened, fueled by her withdrawal and her inability to fully engage with her own life. She found herself drawn to her work, seeking solace in the familiar rhythm of investigations, the pursuit of justice a way to channel her grief and anger. But even in her work, she felt a shift. The cases she took on became darker, more complex, as if she was subconsciously seeking out the shadows. Sarah also found herself grappling with a profound sense of disillusionment. The Ethan Thompson case had shattered her belief in the inherent goodness of people. She had witnessed the depths of human depravity, the capacity for cruelty that can lurk behind the most ordinary facades. She questioned her ability to make a difference, to bring true justice to a world filled with so much pain and suffering. The line between good and evil blurred, and Sarah found herself struggling to maintain her objectivity, her detachment. Yet, amidst the darkness, a flicker of hope remained. The case had also shown her the resilience of the human spirit, the capacity for compassion and courage. She had witnessed Carol's bravery in finally speaking the truth, her determination to protect herself and her remaining family. And she had seen the outpouring of support from the community, the neighbors who, despite their initial shock and judgment, rallied together to offer assistance and comfort. Slowly, Sarah began to heal. She sought therapy, confronting her own demons and learning to process the trauma of the case. She reconnected with friends, finding solace in their companionship. She also found a renewed sense of purpose in her work. The darkness she had witnessed fueled her determination to fight for justice, to protect the vulnerable, to shine a light on the hidden corners of society. The Ethan Thompson case remained a scar on her soul, a reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of evil. But it also became a catalyst for growth, a crucible that forged her into a stronger, more compassionate, and more resilient detective. Years passed after the Ethan Thompson case, the events fading from the forefront of public consciousness but remaining etched in the memories of those directly involved. Sarah Miller carried the weight of the investigation with her, the lessons learned shaping her career and her personal life. She continued to excel as a detective, her reputation for tenacity and empathy growing within the department. She also made a conscious effort to heal from the emotional wounds inflicted by the case. Therapy helped her process the trauma, and she gradually rebuilt her personal life, forging stronger connections with friends and family. The Thompson family, however, remained fractured. David served his time, the experience leaving him a broken man. He and Carol divorced, the bitterness and resentment between them too deep to overcome. Carol eventually moved away, seeking a fresh start in a new city. She carried the burden of her complicity, the knowledge that she had played a role in the tragedy. But she also carried a quiet strength, a determination to rebuild her life and find peace. Ethan's fate remained an open wound. The uncertainty of his disappearance lingered, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of loss. Yet, amidst the tragedy, there were glimmers of hope. Sarah's work led to changes in the way domestic violence cases were handled within the department, a greater emphasis placed on early intervention and victim support. The community of Oak Creek Estates, initially shaken by the events, slowly began to heal. The shared experience fostered a greater sense of awareness and empathy, a willingness to look beyond the surface and acknowledge the complexities of human relationships. And Sarah, in her own way, found a measure of closure. The scars of the case remained, but they became a part of her story, a testament to her resilience and her unwavering commitment to justice. The Ethan Thompson case taught her that the past can cast a long shadow, shaping the present in profound and often unexpected ways. But it also taught her that healing is possible, that even in the face of darkness, hope can endure. As she looked to the future, Sarah carried with her a quiet determination to make a difference, to create a world where children are safe, families are supported, and the truth, no matter how painful, is always brought to light. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more captivating stories.